Thank you, Paul. So, yeah, I'm not going to focus on AI to start with, but I wanted to share a little bit the experience that we have in Amadeus, who is creating data ecosystems, while we're creating ecosystems that actually support data exchange, and that will be a good support for AI as well. Before I start, maybe a couple of words on Amadeus. So Amadeus is a global IT company. It operates the biggest IT systems in travel. Just to give you a sense of the volume that we manage, we routinely handle traffic more than 100,000 transactions per second. So that's equivalent to Google search, and we manipulate similar amount to the biggest company. So we do have a lot of experience in dealing with data internally, and over the last few years, we've used that experience, that expertise, to realize external data exchange, so between company at scale. So a few words on specifically our journey regarding data ecosystems and what we call data spaces. So we were one of the founders of GaiaX. From early stages, we've started to work with Eclipse on what was at the time the most promising framework to do distributed data ecosystems. So we became member of the Eclipse Foundation. We are also one of the companies participating to the IPSAI program. So IPSAI is a funding program run by the European Commission to develop capabilities to develop cloud in Europe. And we participate to this program to support data exchange. And early 2022, we have been working with other companies to fund what is called EONaX, which is a data space, so an ecosystem that is especially in the domain of mobility, transport, and tourism. So together with other big players in the industry to start, let's say, a club of companies who want to work together and exchange data at scale to realize use cases. So I will come back to this in a second, but we have worked in this ecosystem specifically. And we are now at a stage where I can come and present to you some of the findings and some of the outcome of the work we have done with EONaX and with a partner on EONaX. So before I go further, I'm talking about EONaX. So EONaX, as I said, is an ecosystem. So it's a group of companies who got together and who are working together to build value together. The main goal or the focus of EONaX is to create value in tourism and mobility and transport. So bring to life use cases that can only be made because we have so many companies around the same table. And you see here the logo of the main participants to this ecosystem. It's a growing ecosystem. With a strategy, we have initially had a strategy to start small, prove the point, build something together, and then extend. And we are now getting to that phase where we feel we have proven the model. And so we are entering a growth phase for the ecosystem. What have we done to start with in this ecosystem? So unlike there's different data spaces or different ecosystems, we follow different strategies. Some start big with lots of players and then work out how to work together. We, as I said, decided to start small. And more importantly, we started to start with concrete prototyping, concrete building things together to really figure out how could such a data space work. And we naturally, with the players that were around the table at the time, we started to work on what we call the multimodal demonstrator. So you are all traveling regularly, I assume. And with having like airlines, railway operator, airports, and so on around that table, the first use case we built is a demonstrator, so running software that allows to handle what we call multimodal use cases. So multimodal is when, as a traveler, you mix and match different modes of transportation to get to your destination. So train connecting with a flight, and then down to the last mile, so what we call the last mile. So once you get to your destination, you still need to have local transport. And so we built a real-life demonstrator that allows to, as a traveler, to reconstruct an end-to-end view of your journey with real-time data coming from different systems and different providers. So assuming that you have booked in different providers, that lets you reconstruct, let's say, an end-to-end view of your journey. This was really to show the working model and to prove the point that we can connect different providers, each of them keeping the control over their data, and then through what I'm going to talk about in a second, provide solutions that can exploit in real time data from many such providers which remain distributed rather than centralizing the data. As this was successful, we have embarked into further use cases, and the first real production use case actually has just been implemented and finished, and this was to support data exchange in the context of Paris, of the Olympics, Paris 2024. And this has been very successful. This has allowed to connect different players, including the French Ministry of Interior, to share the relevant data to manage delegations on arrival while the event was happening and on departure. So again, this has been very interesting and very successful, and we are now on the way to implement further use cases. So we should have another 2 or 3 use cases in production by the end of the year. So how do we do all this? Well, in terms of building such an ecosystem, and I think we do this in our industry, in the domain of mobility, transport, tourism, but same principle could apply obviously in other verticals, other industries. What we have done is implement what I would describe as a data mesh architecture or data mesh paradigm. So our objective was to avoid the lock-in syndrome that can happen with some technology or with some data exchange environment. So effectively, let every company around the table, around AONX table, to keep hold of their data and keep control on their data, but build an infrastructure that allows to have an aggregated view or a federated view of all the players that are around the table. So for that, and I'm sure some of you have heard of the concept of data space connector, but we've worked on a technical component in open source that sits on top of every company, within every company, and that is basically the entry door for every company to connect to the AONX ecosystem. So on one hand, to declare what are the data that I'm ready to share as a participant to the ecosystem to the rest of the participants. And that also allows to build an aggregated view or federated view of what each of the other participants have to potentially share with me. It allows to negotiate access to data of different partners, and once an agreement is found and a contract is created, it allows to actually consume the data of the partner. And we do this while avoiding to centralize or to duplicate data. So data remains at all time in the control of the participant to the ecosystem, and that's a very key value added for EONX. Is as data owner, companies are not scared of losing control over their data because they keep control at all times. So it really is agnostic. It's connecting technology that is agnostic of where you are hosted. You don't need to all go to the same cloud infrastructure or all use the same data platform technology to be able to share data together. And for this, as I said, we selected some Eclipse open source project as a base to power this ecosystem and those connectors. And we do work with like protocols, I would say, or standards to ensure that we have interoperable systems that can talk to each other. I wanted also to share a few words on how we run and how we operate this. So today, for the purpose of EONX and to get this ecosystem up and running, we have been working on different operating models to connect all the players we have in EONX. And the first operating model we put in place, because this was the easiest to get going, is what we call a connector as a service. So this really is a turnkey solution for the participant of this ecosystem. So in this case, we, as Amadeus, we can deploy a connector, which is owned by one of the members of the ecosystem, run it, and so that the participant of the ecosystem only has to do business configuration of his connector, declare what data asset he's willing to share, negotiate access to assets from others, and so on. So hands off in terms of technology, but you keep control over what you want to do with your connector. That's what we call a connector as a service. We have other participants in our mobility ecosystem who are generally bigger companies who are willing to be in full control of how they connect to EONX, and they are using what we call a self-hosted or self-deploy connector. We provide them the open source distribution of the connector, and they deploy it in their own cloud. Connector is cloud agnostic, so regardless of whether they are in Google, Amazon, or in their own private data center, and they manage from A to Z all actions to connect. And we are also looking at providing in the future a connector as a service at your premises, so that would be for companies who want to have connectors hosted in their own cloud or in their private data center, but do not want to invest in DevOps and running things themselves. So those are especially the first operating model with a connector as a service. This has been something that is quite key to have a lightweight or very small investment for companies to become part of this distributed ecosystem and start to make business together and build use cases together. Right, so I want to keep a few minutes for questions, so I will go quick on the key takeaways. But as key takeaway, we have EONX today that is up and it's an ecosystem with many participants. It's up and running. It has powered some of the use cases around Paris Olympics, so that you can all relate to those. So it's a very promising start, I would say. I think more generally, distributed data ecosystem that empower participants to those ecosystems to remain in control over what they want to do, how they want to share data, under what condition they can keep the control, is what I would say. I'm quite passionate about the topic, but it's effectively the start of a new era. It could drastically change the way we exchange data in the future. That said, I think it's still early days, and we have come to the realization in EONaX, and I think it's true for all other data space initiatives, that use cases remain the key. So we need to work on use cases, we need to work on business models, and those use cases will be the key to success and adoption of those new data ecosystems. But very promising, I would say, so far. So that ends the sharing session I wanted to have here. And since we have 2 minutes, I think